President Putin stated tonight that the US and European countries will be directly involved in Moscow's conflict with Ukraine if they lift restrictions on Kyiv using long-range missiles to strike Russian territory. He warned that this would change the nature of the conflict and mean that the US and other NATO countries were essentially fighting with Russia. Keir Starmer, who is currently heading to Washington, is expected to discuss the use of such missiles tomorrow with President Biden. The Prime Minister responded to President Putin by saying that it was Russia who started the conflict with its illegal invasion and that it could end the war straight away. 2.5 years after Vladimir Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine, Russian bombs and missiles continue to batter the country almost nightly. These strikes are launched from deep inside Russia. To counter these attacks, Ukraine has been urging the West for months to allow it to use the long-range weapons they already supplied to hit back against airfields, logistics, and military targets that sustain these assaults, and to blunt the advances Russia is making on the ground. For Ukraine, the timing is critical with winter approaching. Thus, on the agenda for Keir Starmer's visit to Washington with the Foreign Secretary is the discussion of whether to greenlight attacks on Russian territory. The Russian president warned against such actions. If this decision is made, it will mean nothing other than direct participation of NATO countries, the United States, and European countries in the war in Ukraine. It is their direct participation, and this, of course, significantly changes the very essence of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are fighting with Russia. Despite Putin's warning, momentum is building for Western nations to agree to Ukraine's request. Earlier this week, David Lammy and the U.S. Secretary of State traveled to Kyiv. Russia has already been using missiles supplied by North Korea and is believed to be receiving them from Iran as well. This week, there were further reminders of how other authoritarian regimes are aiding Putin, with Iran going even further in support of Moscow by providing ballistic missiles a significant and dangerous escalation. These are the Storm Shadow missiles that the UK already supplies to Ukraine. Russia had previously warned against doing that, and Ukraine has crossed other Russian red lines too, with drone strikes deep inside Russian territory and a recent attack across the border into the Kursk region. On his flight, Keir Starmer said it was Russia that started this conflict, and Ukraine had the right to self-defense. However, he emphasized the importance of discussions with a key ally when making such significant decisions. BBC News then spoke to their Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, who noted that these comments seemed to be Putin's most hawkish to date. Rosenberg stated that Putin issued a clear warning to the West not to allow Ukraine to use Western missiles to strike Russian territory. However, Putin did not specify what Russia would do if this happens, only mentioning taking appropriate decisions without providing details. In the past, Putin has suggested providing advanced long-range weapons to Western adversaries to strike Western targets abroad and deploying conventional missiles within striking distance of America and its European allies. Russian officials have often accused the West of waging war against Russia on Ukrainian territory. Putin made it clear that if Western missiles are used to target Russian territory, it will escalate the conflict to a new level. Western leaders are now faced with a decision: weigh the risk of escalation against the need to help Ukraine and possibly allow it to strike Russian territory with these missiles. Damian Grammaticus then spoke about the Prime Minister's defiant tone as he heads to Washington. He noted that the Prime Minister was very clear in his comments during the flight, stating that Ukraine has the right to defend itself and emphasizing that it was Russia that launched this invasion. Ukraine argues that it is currently fighting with one hand tied behind its back because Russia can strike from deep inside its own territory while Ukraine cannot respond in kind. Keir Starmer reiterated that the West does not seek any conflict with Russia, but there are important decisions and moments ahead for Ukraine. He believes it's significant to spend time sitting down with key allies in Washington to take strategic and tactical decisions, ensuring that everyone is on the same page.